Welcome to another podcast with Theo Smith, Neurodiversity, and friends. These incredible people I have come along who share their experiences, right? They give up their time, their energy, their life so that you can benefit from it. How incredible is that? So we've started to run a series on A to Z of parenting. That is not that today, but do look out for those if you want to know more. This is those special conversations I have with those individuals who are ready to really support others by sharing their lived experience. And today, I'm very excited to have the incredible Hannah Litt. Hannah, intro yourself to this incredible audience. Let them know a little bit about yourself.
Intro I've ever had. That is the best intro I've ever had. Like everything else, the bar is here now. I just need to say, so for anybody else that ever invites me anywhere, if it's not like that, I'm not interested. That was brilliant. So, me, I am Hannah, pronoun she, her. I have ADHD and OCD. And I'm South Asian, I'm Muslim. So intersectionality has always been really important to me. I didn't know I had ADHD, but I just knew that I just didn't fit in, and I'd feel feelings and all this stuff. And, people would be like, she's a really nice person, but she's not really going anywhere in life. So for me, looking at kind of the way systems were built was always something for me. It always was something that I just wanted. Well, it just didn't feel right. And being neurodivergent, somebody said we were talking about kind of justice sensitivity. And a friend of mine said, Ken kind of came on my post and was like, maybe actually people that are neurodivergent don't have, maybe it's the world that's the issue. And it really goes back to actually just navigating systems that weren't built for us. So I guess I've been on this journey working for organisations, supporting within the D&I space, the anti-racism space, the resourcing space, and then getting to a point where I was like, actually, what's my purpose and what am I here to do, and what are my gifts that my childhood trauma, for example, my intuition, I'm an empath, but also my ADHD, my OCD. It's tough. It's really, really tough having ADHD and OCD, and especially being in the South Asian community. But there's also some greatness about me, and I wouldn't change the way I am. So I've been on this kind of exploration journey of kind of self-healing, spiritual healing, to really understand who I am, and been like, actually, we talk about bringing our whole selves to work or what we do, and I've still felt like I was living kind of two different lives. So for me, I've now created something that allows me to bring all of me into it, which is kind of exciting. It's kind of scary, but it's kind of exciting. But my ADHD means that I just jump straight in, so it's fine. I'm great in a crisis. So yeah, that's kind of me and what I've been doing in a nutshell. But I think the last kind of since my ADHD diagnosis, but then obviously the last 10 months have been really transformative for me.
Let's just dive into the ADHD and the OCD from your perspective. Just give us a kind of explanation of what that means to you, what it looks like, because for everybody it'll be different, right? And because of your background, your experience, trauma, acceptance or lack of acceptance, what just give us a frame for what it looks like for you.
I'm still figuring that out, actually, but I think, like you said, it's that acceptance. I always knew that something wasn't, and do you know what it actually started? It was, and this is why I look at things intersectionally, because code switching is something that we do as Black and brown folks to keep ourselves safe.
Just explain
and
that.
What I'd find is
code switching.
So code switching is kind of being able to walk into a room and put on a different persona. So again, it's another form of masking. And it's something we do inherently in spaces where people don't look like us. It's almost like, right, okay, I need to speak in a certain way, I need to behave in a certain way. I could never really do that. I really sucked at it, I'm not going to lie. And as much as I would like prepare myself and be like, Hannah, keep your mouth shut today. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say today. And I try and make myself busy, and then it would happen because somebody would say to me and I'd feel it was wrong, or I'd want to challenge. But my race came into it because code switching is something we do to keep safe. I couldn't do that, which meant that I kept getting myself into kind of harmful situations. So for me to actually, and I was like, Hannah, why can't you just shut up? And that's actually what I went to the doctor to say. Like I said, I can't keep my mouth shut. I keep interrupting. I said, and actually I feel really rude because I'm not a rude person, but I keep interrupting. I can't help it. And he said, Hannah, I've known you for a while and I think you may have ADHD. So for me, it was the validation, is what I thought I needed. I was like, right, let me get a diagnosis because then I'll know, etc., etc. But the whole process of then getting the diagnosis was pretty traumatic in itself. I went private. It still took me like 18 months nearly. So for me, it was the validation that I thought I needed, but then I didn't actually, I spoke to my doctor again about my OCD, because as I was going through titration, my OCD was, and I could really see it. And people just think it's somebody that cleans the house. But no, it's not. It's the intrusive thoughts that come in. It's the, catastrophizing. And I've always been like that. It's not just, everyone will joke about OCD. Like, oh, I clean the house, I've got OCD. No, it can really take over your life and it's tough. So I spoke to my GP and he said, look, Hannah, this is kind of what it is. He knows me very well. He said, you can go through the diagnosis process. I said, I don't want to. He said, but if you know, then. So I just started, I didn't take the medication, but I started the treatment when it came to kind of talking therapy and stuff. So I didn't get, it came to a point where I was like, actually, the only validation I need is for myself. So I'm going to move, but also I'm going to talk about this because when I was out there trying to navigate this journey, I couldn't find anybody that looked like me. And there was I would go into spaces and they'd be harmful to me. So I was like, right, okay, I don't want anyone to have to go through what I've been through. Because we know like people with ADHD are 5 times more likely to die by suicide. And then you add race onto that. And I was like, I don't want anyone to have to go through what I did, because we navigate our own community as well. So it's not just navigating the systems and spaces that we're trying to navigate, but also within the South Asian community, there's not enough education on it. There's no understand, we're still on we're early on in our journey as a community to really starting to understand and recognize what being neurodivergent is. And because we grow up in the cultures and the environments we do, masking it's really easy, but I couldn't in some sense, but I could, and I was very, very on high alert because I grew up with 2 traumatized parents that came to this country after being expelled from another country. They don't talk about it. So again, I'm carrying that generational trauma as well. So it's not, I just didn't ever want anyone to have to go through this alone, because it's not easy, knowing that they're probably doing it on their own. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to so what does ADHD for me? For me, it means that I now know what I have. I know how it shows up. I know, and what it has done is given me the catalyst to help others ultimately. And like you said, it'll be different for everyone else, but for me, it's the validation, to just not validating someone's diagnosis, just saying you're not on your own. It's okay, and it's tough. Some of the days we talk about superheroes, being a superhero. Some days just getting out of bed is I feel like a superhero. But if I want to call myself a superhero, but don't put that label on me, because it's already tough being a Muslim brown woman navigating organizations without having this expectation that I'm a superhero, because it doesn't give time for the days where it just really, really sucks.
That's really important to highlight as well, Hannah. I think, it's all good and well that we love ourselves, right? And we try and put ourselves in the best position possible. But also sometimes when we're in the dark spaces and places, we often hide ourselves away. I only posted about it today, often people will see the best of us, and we often hide the worst part of ourselves, or it manifests itself in, like you said, in what may be deemed an aggressive way. Sometimes it's about protecting ourselves. And when I'm in my most difficult space and place, I really find it difficult to communicate with someone. And like my brain is like so struggling with all the information and the traffic, that somebody may be asking something really basic of me, but I'm in such a space and place. I can't, even to the point now this morning where I was just like, I can't cope with responding to this now. I just can't cope with it. I need to just leave. And then add in the complexities around intersectionality, some of the points you've made around being from the South Asian community, being a Muslim, a woman, and then come into this late in life in terms of the understanding and appreciation. What would be your advice to others? Because I imagine, based on where you're at as a community, there may be a lot of people who either are listening to this, or they may be listening to it and could pass it on to a friend, a co-worker, who may not be plugged into this channel, right? But they, like
Yeah,
you, are looking for the voice and they're not seeing it. And here's your voice. Here's the opportunity. What can people do when they may feel locked because their family may not be interested or for communicating, or the community, and even their organization? Well, what are your thoughts? What are some of the
yeah.
things you consider on that journey?
I think what I would say to that first and foremost, everything you feel is valid. Like everything you feel is valid. And actually, some parts of our culture is beautiful, right? It's beautiful. It's community. But some places just don't serve us because, you know, we have big families. So I no longer go to, unless it's somebody really close to me, I no longer go to weddings, for example. And I also no longer go to funerals unless it's somebody that I'm really close to, because for me, the sensory overload with that many people is too much. But also I'm an empath. So if I go to a funeral, because I'm so intuitive, because I've had to mask my ADHD so much and be on literally high alert, and then team that up with trying to childhood trauma, team that up with, the trauma that led to me having then hidden disabilities. For me, it's just know that if places don't serve you, it's okay, because not everywhere is made for us. Because if I go to a funeral, I absorb everyone's emotions and I feel it so intensely, and then not being able to regulate my emotions with my ADHD, it makes it really tough, right? It really tough. So I've had to really kind of put some boundaries in. And my first boundary started with my family. And it was really tough. And they're like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so miserable? Because being an ADHD, you're generally quite an extrovert, actually, having the hyperactivity. So people expect. So what I was finding, that actually there was this expectation on me being an extrovert, but I'm not actually an extrovert. It's when I'm safe, I will be an extrovert. Some days I'm like, nobody talk to me, leave me alone. I need to lock myself in this room and just leave me alone. And there will only be set people that can come into my space. So for me, it's when I would be in that space, people would just be like, what's wrong with you? Have I done something? And I'm like, no, I just don't want to talk today. So there comes that expectation. So what I would say to anyone is, speak your truth. Know that it's okay, but everything you feel is valid. And if you don't have anybody else, reach out to me, because, like I said, I don't want anybody going up. But we as a community, we need to start just talking about this stuff, because they're very real experiences. And then when you look at the school system, so you look at actually Black and brown children who's going to the pupil referral units, a lot of them will be undiagnosed ADHD. But also systems do not recognise us. Like at no point when I said I'm struggling, I spoke to all my teachers, never did they say, but you know, she's a bright kid, she will do something. They were just like, just be happy that you're a really nice person, but we're okay with you not achieving anything. That's cool. So for me, the education system, PRUs, and then PRUs are a pipeline to prison. If you look at the prison system, how many people in there are neurodivergent? And we just haven't given them the care, the validation, and the experiences. And you look at it again, you look at ethnicity, who's the highest populations that are in prison at the moment, and who's not getting diagnosed, who's not. There's not even any data out there. So it comes, but also there's an expectation to the reason why the South Asian community are not on board. It's not they hate people that are neuro. There's no education there for us. Where's that education? If there's no data about us, well, what are you telling us? If I look at it as a woman, there's hardly any data. And then I look at it as a South Asian woman and with a Muslim, there's no data out there. They're like, yeah, we collated data in 2012. We haven't done it since. What are people doing? And actually, what a way to make people feel invalid. And like it just perpetuates, because gaslighting is a thing. We're prone to gaslighting, being neurodivergent. So it's just another way of gaslighting. So for me, it's what I stopped doing is trying to sit on tables that I wasn't welcome at, and decided to create my own.
Just flipping this for a moment, that's brilliant, thank you. If I'm thinking we were just talking a bit about there around how individuals can get support and help, that may share some of your experiences, but also from a parental perspective, you've just started to talk about the education system a bit there, and I agree, we have real problems with the education system. Hopefully we're going to start to see some changes. And in some ways it may have improved, there may be some improvements from when I was a kid. In many ways, we've not. It's not improved, right? It's gone more challenging. But now we've opened the lid on it, the topic. If you were to give advice to parents, right, and maybe specifically from a South Asian community, Muslim community, if you're saying there's a lack of awareness and therefore a lack of acceptance for their children, and I know this because my mum and dad, right, when I was a kid, obviously I'm not South Asian, but generational,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely. It's a
35,
generation
40
too.
years ago, my parents were like, dyslexia isn't a thing, or at least it isn't a thing for my son, right? Because we don't want to put that label on him. And there were no other labels that could be identified for me at that point of ADHD and autism. That wasn't a thing being talked about. But dyslexia had started to come into the psyche conversation in the
Yeah.
school system. And so as a little bit more normal, but still enough for parents to go, no, I'm not having that label. So if where you're at as a community currently, like, what would you say
Yeah.
to parents if they were listening now?
I think there is this piece, and I think, you know, we might be getting a little bit better. I think as the generation, like I said, it's a generational thing. So I think for children kind of that are in school now, it's not as bad. But we grew up knowing that the teachers were always right. Teachers were whatever the teacher said. And I remember one day my dad being like, "I don't see you doing any homework. I want to come and speak to your teacher." And I was like, shit, like, what's going to happen? Because I hadn't been, because I was really struggling. But what I'd done really well is organise 2 proms. I was really good at but I wasn't doing like my coursework. So I said to my head of year, I said, my dad wants to see you because he thinks I'm not doing my work. And he was like, are you? I was like, no, I'm struggling. So he met with my dad, and what he said was, and this is the irony of it, he said to my dad, your daughter is never going to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a pharmacist, a solicitor. That's not who she just doesn't have it in her. So but she's like a good person. So just be happy with that. And I was like, yes, get in. Like, you stopped my dad like going wild at me when I get home. Like, he's just going to, you know, like, I told you weren't doing your homework. Blah. You saved my ass. So I was like, thank you. And then literally, I even found him when I got my ADHD diagnosis. And I was like, remember that day you saved, thank you. And then when I literally like sat there and deeped it, I was like, you literally were okay with me just being nothing. You didn't even try and help me. So I think there is something around South Asian parents also, and I'd say that for Black and brown parents, but I understand why it's difficult, but really advocate for your child. Children are not inherently bad. One thing I did is I became a governor at a school because I was like, right, there was a part of my healing that needed to go back and understand how, if things have got better, if they haven't. And I would challenge in that room, and I said to them, like, I'm here, and they implemented 90-minute lessons. And I said, but how are you supporting your, you know, neurodivergent children? They were like, you know, it's fine, data set. I said, how have you made that decision for all neurodivergent children? Well, the data has told us, and we've done it. I said, but there is no data. I said, if you know of some that I don't know of, please share it with me, but there isn't. So as I was doing a walk around, some children had their heads on their desk, they were lying down, they were like this, they were like, and he said to me, he said, oh, you know, we'll handle that. I said, no, please don't. I said, because you want me to be a governor here, but because of what I bring. I said, but I was that kid. I said, I was that kid, and would you have done the same thing to me? I said, so no. I said, actually, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but ask them if they're okay and what they need. Give them the support, give them the wraparound care, but also educate the communities, right? As educators, educate the community. So we all have a responsibility. But I think for South Asian parents, it then, like you said, it's that label, isn't it? It's that, and when you're walking around and we've been told you've got to work 10 times as hard as anybody else to get somebody that's white, your white counterpart, to get to anywhere, because I can't turn this skin off, right? I can't turn it off. But would I want another label? Would you want another label put on your child to make them navigating even harder? So I think, and that's why when I got diagnosed, I had a manager that, you know, wasn't the best when I went through my diagnosis, and it felt a bit like a character assassination. And I thought, you can either own my narrative or I'm going to proudly wear every single one of my labels out here, and I'm like, yes, this is who I am, and I own my own narrative. So I think for parents, just really teach your kids to advocate for themselves, because neurodivergent kids are awesome. We're pretty awesome people. So advocate for your kids, allow them to speak and listen to them. And if they say they don't want to be in a space, then it's okay. Like, people forget that children are tiny humans, and they have bad days. They feel emotions. You know, I think there's this like, why is the child acting up? I adjusted. I'm 38 and I still act up most days. So giving them the care and the grace that they deserve, but also know that it's not limiting. It's not I wouldn't change. ADHD and OCD is tough. I wouldn't change my brain for the world, because the way that I can see things coming, my intuition, thinking outside the box, I think my brain's brilliant. It's brilliant. So just know, because my nephew is, and he's not very studious, so to speak, but the way he talks and the way he handles himself, he's like he reminds me a lot of me. And I was like, he is going to be so successful, because he's like got the gift of the gab. People like him. He tries new things, but he might not go down the traditional education route. But that's okay, because who's that traditional education route made for? And I think that's what it goes back to, navigating
You know
systems.
what? Yeah, I think that's brilliant, Hannah. And the reality is a lot of some of the challenges that we face as a community is past trauma, right? And a lot of the past trauma, or some of the past trauma, can be controlled by your community, by your family, by your network when you're a child, but also it can be inflamed, right? So there's an opportunity for parents, for family members, for co-workers, whatever. You can have a massive impact on that human being that's in front of you,
Yeah,
whether that be a child or a young person coming out of school, college, university, apprenticeship, whatever. Like, you have massive influence over that person, and what you do really matters, and the way that you speak to them matters, and the way that you make them feel matters. And if you get frustrated with them, like we all get frustrated, right? But if you get frustrated with them and you keep telling them what they're getting wrong and what they're bad at, that is triggering. That's trauma. That, they probably had that right throughout their school life, and now they're coming into another space and place where you're giving them the same complex.
absolutely, 100%. At the end of the day, we're responsible. All of us are responsible. It takes a village to raise a child, right? And community is really, really important. So passing this information on, but also, when you're out and you have a child that quite clearly has autism, has ADHD, and they're having a meltdown. Like I'm an adult, I still have a meltdown. To look at that parent with judgment, to look at that child with judgment, where's your care and compassion for a child? Children are not inherently bad, right? They are. We grow up in our environments, right? So, and I also believe that most parents are doing the best that they can too. So again, it's affording that grace and knowing that actually you can impact somebody day to day, like to know the coping mechanisms that I have now that I didn't have when I was younger. It would have saved me a lot of heartbreak, a lot of pain, a lot of getting into those really dark spaces, because that is the reality. The ADHD can take you to a really dark place, and so can OCD, and so can autism. It can take you to a place which, unless you've been there, you can't describe. And when you feel that so intensely, it's really tough. So you're right, having that ability to influence people, do it. We all have a responsibility to talk about everything. When people are not getting equity, when people are struggling, when people are essentially, some people die from this stuff because it gets so intense. Addiction is an impact. Prison, suicidal ideation, all of that stuff happens. So why, if we could understanding the impact of the support and the education and wrapping your arms around someone in whichever way it needs to be at the time, we can actually make things easier for the next generation.
Absolutely. And when we think about organisations then, their approach, Hannah, what can they consider, when you walk through the door, or when others within the community walk through the door? What would you hope that organisations are going to start to consider? What do they need to start to provide? What advice can you give them, or insight you can give them that will put them in a better position to make better decisions around the way that they support their fellow co-workers?
Yeah, that's the word, isn't it? It's support. So I know that when I was going through my diagnosis, people would say to me, right, what do you need? I was like, I don't know. I have no idea yet. I don't know. I said, because I'm going through this period of, oh, I know what it is now. It all makes sense. But I also was going through this period of like, oh, what would my life have been like if I actually had the support earlier on? Where would I be? So you're kind of like mourning this life that you didn't have, that you could have had, that you should have had. So I think organisations, the approach that they take is really important. I'm not, have your policies, etc., have your frameworks, but also deviate, because the amount of people that will be sitting in your organisation that look like me, that are black and brown, who have not got the support from their parents, have not had the support from their families, not because their families are not good people, but it's, again, it comes back to that lack of education. So they might not want to get a diagnosis, or they might even be like, no, I'm fine. But so I've had individuals that have been in my team or in my organisation where I've seen, quite clearly they show traits. What I didn't do was go, oh, I think you've got, well, we had conversations and I guided, but what I taught them was how to advocate for themselves. And I put the support around them anyway. So what, I made sure minutes were sent. I made sure, so I just got to know them, because actually in terms of what they needed, it aligned with autism too. So I was like, right, I'm not going to push you and say, well, you don't have a diagnosis, so I don't believe you. Put the support around them anyway. If you see someone struggling, just dig a little, create. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is just create safety for people because when people might not say I have ADHD, but they might say, oh, I'm really struggling. I struggle with admin. I can't tell you. If anyone is waiting for an email back from me, I'm sorry, I struggle with admin. Pick up the phone and call me. It's horrific. And for me, when we say like, oh, I hate admin, it feels like climbing up a mountain. There is some things that will take me 2 minutes to do. I need to cancel my Sky subscription. It's been 2 months. Can I afford it? No. But the having to do that, it feels like climbing a mountain. But ask me to do a podcast, I'm like, yeah, cool, I'm here. Things and people don't understand it's like physical pain when you feel it, like, to do something that you struggle with. It's like physical. Take that stuff away from people. For me, I kind of said in the last organisation, I was like, look, I really struggle with this. If someone can take it away from me, you're going to get a whole lot more from me, because this will literally make me sit in front of my screen and just stare at it for like 3 days. So again, just start looking at, actually, it doesn't just because, and don't hire people just for their neurodivergent. Like, please don't do that. Please don't be like, okay, we've got IT roles, so we're just going to hire, and if you do, great, hire them. Don't put that expectation on them, because autistic people are they really like detail. Don't put that on them, because again, it doesn't allow them to make a mistake or be human. So again, for me, it's humanizing everybody. And people need to start opening up their minds to what having ADHD, OCD, autism, just being neurodivergent looks like, because I think everyone has an image in their head of what somebody with autism would look like, or ADHD, and they don't look like me.
It's interesting, and we've mentioned about labeling and not always needing to label, and not being able to get the diagnosis, not having the energy to go through a diagnosis, OCD, for example, but knowing, right, and having your GP validate that, so that you're making decisions all the time around how much pressure do I want to put on myself to get a label, when actually what I need is help or support or understanding. When I worked in a particular organisation and I was doing advocacy around neurodiversity, I had a female colleague, Asian, come up to me because of all the work I was doing, and she literally whispered to me in the open plan office and went, Theo, I can't tell people about my dyslexia because of the department that I work in, the type of work that she was doing. She felt like it would highlight some of the mistakes she was making, because she did feel like she was making errors, and she thought that would be a reason to go, oh, that's why you've made those mistakes, we'll get rid of you. But also the expectation, and that's exactly what I had. The expectation of being from an Asian community, that she was in a good role, in a good department, but maybe not as good as some expectations would be within her family or community. The other thing is, she was like, I can't even really talk about this with my family because they just don't get it. They're not interested. And so when you're thinking about that, right? So you're thinking about struggling, you're thinking about, there is a diagnosis there, but you're not allowed to talk about it or deal with it in any way with anybody, your friendship group, community, or whatever. And then you can't deal with it in the workplace, because the particular thing that you work on and do may be an alarm bell to say, oh, this is going to be a long-term problem, therefore we no longer want you. You're early in your career, and she is talking to me as like the person or like ask for help and support. Like, what world do we live in where I am the person she's left with to support? Like, is that? And so, sorry, it was just all resonating. Like, with in terms of stuff that I've seen and experienced, and like, oh, like, and so much of what you're telling resonates with that experience as well, Hannah. So I'm just mentioning that because it's
Yeah, no, and it's really important to understand that actually, because after I told the organisation that I was in, I told I had a conversation, and he said to me, I researched ADHD for an hour last night. He said, so you do this and you do that, and you do this and you do that, like you like this is mistake. Da, da, da. You think too big, and all of this stuff, but I don't know if that's you, just who you are, or if that's your ADHD. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I'm going to ever tell anyone again. Right, if I've got it. And that's when I sat with it, and I was like, no, actually, I'm going to own this. So I totally understand, but also recognizing that getting a diagnosis is a privilege. To get that diagnosis is a privilege, and not everybody has that privilege. Because if we start looking at gender pay gap, you look at ethnicity pay gap, it's not cheap. Or you're waiting 5 years and you're sitting in limbo for 5 years. And in that time, you're still struggling. So, just to even get a diagnosis is a privilege. But also, when we're looking at the diagnosis, we're looking at how it shows up. Again, who's designed that? And we know that medical systems are inequitable as well. So again, what does that even look like? I know that if people looked at me and met me, they would never go, oh, you've got ADHD. But I have. And some days I don't sleep for 4 days in a row. And I still, all of this stuff. So I think there's a whole kind of dismantling. This again, it's a mindset change. It's kind of dismantling what you think in your mind. But I have people message me a good few times a week saying, "Hannah, I think I've got ADHD. I'm not sure." And they're always from the South Asian or Black community to say, "I think I've got. I don't know what to do. Can I talk to you?" I'm like, "Absolutely, yes, you can." So I hear you. I just resonating back, I guess.
amazing. Thank you. And I think that brings us nicely on as we close this off today. Thinking about the future, Hannah, what you want to do, how you're going to, what you hope for in terms of kind of an anti-racist society that is more inclusive to everybody, incorporating neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion within that context. And then if we're also thinking about intersectionality, what are you hopeful for? What are you going to do? And if people wanted to connect with you, to reach out to say, Hannah, we'd love you to come and support us. Give us a description of what some of those things might be as well.
So there's so the first thing is empathy. So one thing I am doing now that I've kind of launched my own organisation is actually coaching leaders with empathy to help them to understand, because everybody deserves safety regardless of who you are. Even if you're sitting there, discomfort will come, absolutely, but it's growth, and I'm not too worried about discomfort. It's cool, we can get past that and it's fine. But I think there's also organisations to really start, when we look at understand that process, when it's going through the diagnosis process, how can you support them? I would love to see it be included in private medical, but then not everybody gets private medical. But how are you supporting those people? How are you bringing them in? Don't just bring them in from a tokenistic perspective. So I really want to work with organisations to really start taking an intersectional approach. And I want to kind of bring social justice into the workplace. And when I say social justice, people go, oh my God, but all that means is access. It means equity. It means kind of redistribution of power, so to speak, and just creating an environment that actually everyone can thrive in, whether they care about the climate, they care about social justice, they can bring all of that. Because when you're trying to mask, what they don't realise is somebody who is neurodivergent, who masks, I now have chronic pain syndrome, I have a brain condition. Because of my masking so much, it manifested into my body. So we can avoid that. So I think organisation, and all I'm here to do is essentially empower everyone. I want to empower the leaders to have the confidence to do the right thing and not feel they're going to say the wrong thing. But then I want to empower my own community, because I want to create leaders. I want to create more of me. Every time, I'm sure you've been, there's one of you, there's one of me. I want everyone to be like that. And for me, it starts with really just unpacking. But for me, it's giving people the empathy and the care to do that, because we all need to get to a destination where environments are better for everybody.
Absolutely. And clearly it is needed and required. Just based on my story before, there needs to be representation right across the board, because otherwise it's really difficult. And we then have to put ourselves out in a wider world at further risk by leaning into people who may not be as empathetic, and we're then taking risks Whereas we shouldn't be taking those level of risks. There should be greater support mechanisms to help everybody in society.
But,
That's not the case, but there should be. So I value you,
and I
Hannah.
think and I think just one last thing, the actual communities that we have and the organisations that are, you know, neurodiversity, neurodivergent, neuro-inclusive organisations, whether they be voluntary or there's still a lot of work for them to do, because it's still not an intersectional approach. Because I can sit through some of that stuff, like I can walk into them like, hey, I don't belong here, and walk away. So I want all of those organisations also to get in touch if you need. I'm not here to you know, hold everything in. I'm here to share. Sharing is a big part of what I do. There is enough for everyone. There are neurodivergent people everywhere. Then I'm like, it's not, you know, I know we're going through a cost of living crisis, but there's enough to share. But also challenge yourselves to really look, and just because you have one or two people in there that are the global majority, it doesn't mean you're serving everybody, and your spaces can be harmful. So I would challenge all of those organisations, whether they be, you know, voluntary groups, whatever they may be, to get in touch and actually start listening. And I'm here to help them, because ultimately, I said it 3 years ago, I want to change the world and I want to save some lives. So, and I know it sounds like a really big pipe dream, but even if I can help a few people, it's so important to me to make sure that they don't have to go through the dark times for this reason, because they've just not felt welcome anywhere.
Absolutely. And I know it comes from powerful lived experience, Hannah, and that's where, you know, I think we make a profound difference, because we understand it, we've been there, we've lived it, and therefore we know where some of the challenges and gaps. Not all, we're still learning, like you said before, and we're still on a journey of understanding and appreciation ourselves, but maybe we're a little bit more
That
forward.
journey has to have, yeah, the journey has to have a destination, because none of us get on a train and just go, just take me anywhere, Miss train driver, please just take me. So what is that endpoint and what is the goal here? Because otherwise we're just on an everlasting journey that just keeps going and going and going. So what's the end destination? Let's be really clear on what the milestones in between that.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges for ND Mind as well, like a super fast train, but with no destination. And therefore everyone's like, whoa, look how successful they are, look how they're flying. But they just never get into that space or place. And therefore that becomes exhausting. And, you know, we end up failing at achieving anything sometimes, because we could never really grasp what the destination was. And others may do it. We need to help more people find out what the interim destination is, if not the end destination.
Right.
So, Hannah, amazing. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure to have you on. That was brilliant and needed. 100%. You're amazing.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, and so are you. Hey.
Done.